Chris Simpson.
Hipkins, I believe, is the word that you're looking for there, Mr. Speaker.
I do apologise.
But I'll forgive you. I'll forgive you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm mortally wounded. But look, Mr. Speaker, there are two procedural aspects to this debate. The first is, which are kind of new for the House because of the changes to the standing orders that were made by the Standing Orders Committee of the last Parliament. One is that we're debating this matter under urgency, and I'll deal with that one in a minute. But the second is that for what has now become relatively rare occurrence, we're debating a referral motion that gives the Select Committee a shortened time frame and a whole lot of additional powers. Now, it was standard practice in the House that ministers, for quite a long period of time, would be able to move all sorts of additional powers to the committee in their referral motions. There'd be no debate on those. It was just standard practice. It would happen all the time. And the Standing Orders Committee considered that issue along with a range of other potential amendments to the standing orders when the standing orders were reviewed at the end of the last Parliament. And this new provision that is now being enacted now that allows this motion to be debatable was part of a whole package of amendments made to the standing orders and part of the trade-offs, because the changes to the standing orders made by the last Parliament actually gave the government a number of additional powers to expedite business before the government without the need to do the sort of thing that they are doing within this referral motion now. It gives the government powers to use extended sitting, for example, so that they don't have to use urgency so much. So we're considering this under urgency, which in itself is unnecessary because there are a whole lot of additional ways that the government could gain the additional time they need in the House to consider this matter without having to resort to urgency. But we are debating a much reduced time frame for the bill, and I think it's a good advance that these are now debated and therefore have become much more rare in their occurrence. So the question that the House has to turn itself to in these sorts of debates is whether the justification for shortening the time frame is sufficient. And I want to talk through a little bit about the process of what happens to the bill from here, because there are certain time lengths within the process when the bill gets referred to a select committee that draw into question whether the bill could be adequately considered within the 8 weeks that we have given in this House. So I would hope that the committee that this bill is referred to will advertise and call for public submissions. In order to do that, they have to have a meeting. The committee comprises the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, among others. Therefore, getting them together to have the first meeting in order to call for the submissions will probably take a little bit of time. May not even happen this week. If we pass it today, may not even happen this week. The Prime Minister traditionally is not in the House on Thursdays. I don't think I'm supposed to say that, but Thursdays we don't necessarily expect the party leaders to be here on Thursdays, and therefore they may not be here tomorrow. So the meeting may not happen this week and might not happen until next week. At that point, there's then a process to lodge the advertisement with the newspapers. That normally takes a couple of days by the time the advertisement actually makes it into the paper. You've then got to give people a reasonable amount of time to read the advertisement and actually prepare their submission. So the question then becomes, well, who are the sorts of people who are going to be interested in making a submission on this? Civil liberties groups, lawyers, people with expertise in this particular area. They'll also typically be quite busy people. I would imagine, given the subject nature, that there'll be members of the Fourth Estate, of the media, who are going to be very interested in the extension of powers to the GCSB, and they may also want to make submissions. Because the media, in fact, the GCSB's powers have been used against the media by the current government over the teapot tapes. So the media are going to have an interest in an extension of the GCSB's powers and are likely to want to make a submission, and we need to allow sufficient time for them to consider the nature of the bill, the contents of the bills, and make informed and educated decisions around what sort of input they want to have into that process. And the time frame that we are allowing does not do that. It is another attack on the freedom of the press. This bill is another attack on the freedom of the press, because we know that the government that we have now is very happy to use the GCSB's powers to attack the media, and therefore we have to make sure, because the media are a very important safeguard in our democratic process, we need to make sure that they are given sufficient time and opportunity to make submissions and to have their voices heard in this process. And the truncated time frame simply does not allow that to happen. So why the urgency? Why are we even trying? Why is the government, it's not we because the opposition is firmly opposed to the shortened time frame, but why is the government even trying to push this bill through with such haste? Given that they have known about these activities that this bill relates to for over a year, why is it that all of a sudden now the whole thing has to be fixed within 8 weeks? It is completely unnecessary. And in fact, what the Labour Party has said is that the process should be a longer one and a much more extensive one that considers the wide-ranging ramifications of the concerns around the way the GCSB is operated, and pushing this through simply thwarts what should be a very constructive debate around how the GCSB uses its powers. Let's be very clear about the nature of the bill that the government are trying to push through. It's around illegal activity by the government spy agency spying on New Zealanders, and it seeks to make that legal. I've mentioned in my speech so far some of the organisations who may be interested in making a submission on this. Civil liberties groups, lawyers, the media. But actually, this being the People's House, any New Zealander should have a right to be able to consider this legislation and make a submission on it. Because the bill gives the GCSB the power to spy on any New Zealander. Any mum or dad, as John Key refers to them, could be spied on by the government under this legislation, and will they have an opportunity to make a submission on this bill within the time frame that is proposed? I don't think that that the government is doing any more than paying lip service to the democratic process. Because in fact, if the government was genuinely committed to providing an opportunity for people to make their submissions and to have a say, they wouldn't be trying to push this through in 8 weeks. The regular time frame for a select committee is somewhere between 4 to 6 months. So the default setting really is about 6 months. And there is another provision, and it's non-debatable. This debate wouldn't happen if it was 4 months or longer. So the government can shorten it by 2 months without having to have the debate. But there's another way that the government could shorten the referral, the time frame for the select committee. And that is to take a recommendation to the business committee, which is comprised of all of the parties in the House, and get agreement on a shortened time frame. So even if a shortened time frame was deemed to be desirable, and it was deemed to be desirable across the House, so it wasn't being done for political purposes, but there was some genuine need for urgency, there's a provision in there for this whole debate to be avoided, because the business committee could agree a shortened time frame. The records of the business committee will record that no such proposal has been received. The minutes of the business committee, I think, are public. Certainly the determinations of the business committee are public, and no such proposal was received. So the government didn't even attempt to gain cross-party agreement for this shortened time frame. So that is a matter of concern, because what it means is that the government are using a wafer-thin majority in the House, and getting thinner by the day, to try and push through legislation that is incredibly controversial, that gives the GCSB the power to spy on New Zealanders and dramatically reduces the opportunity for the people who will be the subjects of this legislation, i.e. every single New Zealand citizen and resident, very importantly, and resident. It denies them the opportunity to fully participate in this process. That is fundamentally wrong. This bill should go through a full, regular select committee process, but in fact even that is premature, because what should happen first is there should be a full review into how we got to this position, so that the GCSB, the New Zealand public, can have confidence that this government are protecting their rights to privacy, among other things. This bill doesn't do that. It is in fact a violation of that principle, and the process around passing it is a further violation of our democratic principles in this House, and it is an affront to our democratic process.
Jackie Dean.
I'd move that the question be now put.
We did get some new material then, so I'll hear Dennis O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. New Zealand First opposes the time frame